The Cleveland Cavaliers select Evan Mobley.
Has been a historical franchise in this league for years.
The Boston Celtics select Jason Tatum.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Happy New Year. Everybody gets to adjust to now saying 2022, especially Keith Smith, who now has to fill it out on everything. Keith, you mentioned a second ago that you have to now put 2023 on when some trade things expire and things like that. Yeah. How is that going?
Yeah, not well. I keep putting 2021 and 2022, and then it's like, wait, that's not right. Let me fix that. And then this Rondo trade, which I know we finally is done official, and we've got all the details. We'll break that down in a minute. That finally went through, and I had to go back and fix a bunch of stuff I'd already put in because I had plugged it in like it was happening a few days ago when we thought it was going to go down. So yeah, good times all around.
Well, I mean, it's something that by the time you get used to it, it's going to be, November 2022, and then you'll get a month or two of normalcy, and then it'll switch all over again. So that seems to be how it goes with things of that nature. But everybody joining us again, Happy New Year. We appreciate all of you, and happy to report we hit 13,000 subscribers over on the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. If you're among those who haven't subscribed yet, please do hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on notifications as well. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, make sure you do follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Keith, we do need to talk about the Rondo trade, but before we get there, Kyrie Irving is back. It looks like he's going to be He's going to be playing on Wednesday for the Brooklyn Nets. I didn't think this was going to happen. I didn't think he was going to play this season, and now here we are, Kyrie Irving playing in road games for the Nets.
Yeah, it was the same as you. I kind of had written it off, and as we had, I think, both said multiple times, if the Nets get anything from him, you consider it a bonus and you move on with that. That's kind of how you treat it. We thought of it as like one of these long-term injuries, like Kawhi Leonard or Jamal Murray or one of those guys. If you see anything from the guy this year, great, and that's good. And if not, then you move on. Huge for the Nets. They've been putting a very heavy minutes load on Kevin Durant and James Harden. They actually did not play well their last time out on, I believe that was on Saturday.
Against the Clippers.
They struck against the very much Clippers.
Yeah.
Because it was let me run through this lineup because I actually happen to have it right in front of me. This was the starters. Serge Ibaka, okay. Amir Coffey, Terrence Mann, Eric Bledsoe, Reggie Jackson. Not awful, but not great.
Right.
Not especially in a road game as well, because the game was in Brooklyn. The bench for the Clippers in this game: Xavier Moon, real person, not a made up
created character,
creative player. Justice Winslow, Keon Johnson, James Ennis, and Wenyen Gabriel, whose prior games had come with the Brooklyn Nets. Just kind of an oddity there. So
that's it. They had a spy on their team that he knew all their plays. That was what it was.
Ennis and Gabriel came in with it all locked in. But yeah, so they lost that game. Steve Nash called it unacceptable. Said their focus wasn't where it needed to be. Their care factor. Kevin Durant took it a little bit further. We try to keep the show family friendly here, but he said a lot of stuff that was expletive filled about the way they showed up with their attitude and those kind of things. James Harden, not quite as passionate as James Harden is not usually as Kevin Durant is in the media, said the same thing. So I don't want to go too far with, gosh, the Nets really need Kyrie because they're still one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah.
But I do think they have realized we're putting too much on some guys. We're asking some limited veterans off the bench to do too much for us. This is a team that is mostly back to healthy after health and safety protocols ran through their roster like it has everybody else. So let's see where this goes. But yeah, Kyrie only going to play in road games. So if he plays in every road game starting on Wednesday with the Pacers, he'll play in 25 regular season games the rest of the way through mid-April when the season ends. So beyond fascinated to see how this works for the for the Nets, and how this works with a truly a part-time player that's only going to play like every other game ish.
Well, and the Nets were up fairly big late in that game against the Clippers, and the Clippers came back and got the win. So that was a little bit extra frustrating for Brooklyn. But now they've dropped to second in the East. The Chicago Bulls, who are on the 7-game win streak, has now claimed the 1 seed. I've seen people out there saying, well, if Kyrie can only play in road games, the Nets, the Cavs are 4.5 games behind, or 3.5 games behind the Nets for the 5 seed. Should the Nets tank to lose home court advantage so you get Kyrie and you get more road games in the playoffs? I don't think they will go that far. That would be they're not actually going to do that. But it's interesting that the Nets will probably be a better road team from here on out than home team.
Yeah, definitely a more fully realized team than what they were, for sure. I could see maybe some gamesmanship coming down the stretch to say, hey, let's drop behind maybe Chicago and Brooklyn, or if Miami is pushing. But I don't think they're going to drop all the way down to like the 5th seed and have to play their playoff series. Because the other thing is, we see this, you start messing around with stuff like that, you end up getting punished. At some point, then there's some kind of upset where you now have home court advantage and you didn't expect to, or something along those lines, and it becomes very messy. So I don't think we're going to see them tank it out. I just really want to see how this works, because it's odd. We have seen players. Kemba Walker, for the last full year with the Boston Celtics, did not play in the second half of back-to-backs. But that's different. That is a different kind of thing. That didn't mean it was necessarily always road games, always home games. It was just with that. Now, many have said they can plan for this. They know what they can do. They can, when they play a road game and then maybe a home game on a back-to-back, you can run him out there for 40 plus minutes and say, go, because you're not playing tomorrow,
right?
Or whatever the case is. You can really, if you need to spot Durant or Harden a night off, you probably do it when you're on the road now, because you're going to let Kyrie run the show. So let's see what this looks like. But yeah, Wednesday, we'll see how it looks. I mean, I expect, like anybody else, it'll probably take him a handful of games to get fully up to speed as well.
I mean, I know people are going to be tuning in to see what happens and to see what the Nets look like. Absolutely, to see what it looks like with them fully healthy. But there we go. So Kyrie Irving making his debut on Wednesday against the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers have got to be like, come on,
yeah, right?
Really,
yeah,
really.
Pacers have lost 4 in a row.
Yeah.
Barely kind of hanging in there in the fringes of the play-in race. Never mind anything else. And he had to play here. Thanks.
Right. All right, let's get into the Rondo trade, which is now official. Officially official. It's done. Rondo heads
with a different perimeter.
Yeah, it changed today. So this deal changed. We weren't expecting this, but here's the press release right now from the Lakers side of it. Lakers have required the draft rights to Louis Liberi, will not play in the NBA, from the New York Knicks as part of a 3-team trade in which the Cavs acquired Rajon Rondo from the Lakers. The Knicks get Denzel Valentine from the Cavs and the draft rights to Brad Newley and, Wong Zilin. Zaleen, sorry. Laker legend, and cash from the Lakers. It was announced today. So Keith, this changed today. We had heard it was Rondo to the Cavs. The Lakers were getting Denzel Valentine. They were probably going to waive him. Instead, Denzel Valentine's being sent to the Knicks. The Lakers are paying the Knicks $1.1 million to take Denzel Valentine's salary off their books. They are waiving a player in order to make room for that contract. Wayne Selden getting waived by the Knicks. And most likely, according to Ian Begley, the Knicks will then in turn waive Denzel Valentine. So why the change? Why did this happen this way?
Yeah, a couple things. So let's do the easy one first. Is the Cleveland side of this. Not much changes from their standpoint in this. They get Rondo, they send out Valentine, and that is essentially it for them. They are getting Valentine's the minor trade exception they created bumps up to about $850,000 it's essentially an unusable trade exception. But that's the very simple, easy part of this. Let's go to the Lakers next. The Lakers did not want to take on Denzel Valentine's salary, even if the plan was to waive him, because that was going to still put 800 plus thousand on their books. So by doing this, really at no real cost to them, the Lakers send out couple draft rights to guys who are never going to play in the NBA.
Right.
Get those sent out. They get draft rights to a guy who is never going to play in the NBA.
Because you have to send something.
Yeah, exactly. You have to send something. You have to do. That's just the way it works in this. So what ends up happening here with the Lakers in this trade, the Lakers now free up a roster spot. That was always the end goal here, but they save real dollars about $3.5 million or so, roughly, because they did send the cash out.
Yes.
And that cash essentially covers Wayne Selden plus what the Knicks are likely to eat for Denzel Valentine's few days. It'll probably be on the roster. So that's why it's that odd amount of money of about 1.1 million. But now some are saying like, well, why not you just eat this salary and not send the 1.1 million? Well, that's a great question, because eating that 900,000 for Valentine, if they just waived him, in terms of tax dollars, that works out to be a little over 4.5 million in that range because of the penalties on the tax. So now what happens is you don't have to eat that. That lowers everything down. And here we are for the Lakers. And then for the Knicks side, you jump in, you get a little bit of cash paid. There's still, I've seen the reporting, and Ian Begley's as tied in with the Knicks as anybody is, so I would assume he's accurate on this, that they're going to waive Valentine. A couple people have said, maybe they'll take a look at him. There is a thought they just signed Ryan Arcidiacono on a 10-day contract, and there's a thought with Kemba Walker. We didn't talk about this, but we'll throw it in here. He did not play over the weekend. He was in the middle of warm-ups and felt pain in his left knee. That's the one that's been the problem, and was like, I can't go. And they had to take him out of the game, like literally, 20, 30 minutes before tip that happened. So maybe even less. So there's a lot of thought that they want to add Arcidiacono, because remember, Derrick Rose is also out. So they're really down ball handlers right now in New York. Arcidiacono seems like a Tibbs guy, right? Kind of a hard-nosed guy who'll just get after a little bit. So that probably is ultimately where they go. Is they'll see what he looks like on this hardship 10-day, and then maybe sign him from after that, and he'll take that roster spot. So they basically get their expenses, if you will, covered for jumping in and doing basically not much, except freeing up a roster spot for themselves too. So interesting little wrinkle. Probably won't amount to a whole lot, league-wide ramifications there, but that's what we do on this show, is break down the nitty-gritty. So it was a fun little wrinkle to the trade.
The biggest name in the trade is Rajon Rondo, who's 67 years old right now, and look, he's a brilliant basketball mind. I think he's what the Cavs need. I think he's somebody that can hop in.
The dude on his way up.
I know. I feel I like Rondo a lot, but I think he can. I think he can help the Cavs. Right? They needed to get a point guard to come in, even if he's just a stopgap until they find somebody else. Whatever they do, I think he can help the Cavs. And so this made sense from their perspective. It made sense from the Lakers' perspective. They wanted to free up a roster spot, maybe a Stanley Johnson move coming in terms of keeping him for the remainder of the season. Made sense for the Knicks too to jump in for, like you said, for basically the price of just hopping on a call. They get something out of this too. So this is kind of a win-win-win trade for all parties involved. Yes, it's a minor one. This isn't shifting the balance of power in the league or anything like that, but it's still, I think it was a good bit of business. The one question that I have from here is the Lakers, if they save that, 3.5 million or whatever, does any of that get left over once you then sign someone for the remainder of the season? Say it is Stanley Johnson.
Yeah, that'll get eaten into, because if they sign someone like Stanley Johnson to a prorated deal, let's do some math on the fly, because we always love that. But I can tell you what it'll look like here, just because I happen to actually have it up. So let's say they sign Stan. When does his 10-day run out? Do you know?
I believe it's today. It was last night or today.
Yeah, it was today. You're right. Him and Darren Collison both. So either one of them, they sign those guys. So today is January 3rd, right? So that is 28 days left in January, or actually 29 because we would count today. That is 98 days left in the season times the prorated amount. So about 940,000 in prorated salary, assuming it would be a 1-year deal, because it could be a 2-year veteran minimum, but let's assume it's a 1-year. 940,000 times the amount that they are going to be over the luxury tax by. That's going to work out to be pretty close to what they ate up. So they're basically going to break even on this,
And they wouldn't have,
versus
had
the
they
way
not.
they would have done it.
Right. Had they not done that, they would not have broken even. Had they not shipped
Correct.
out Denzel Valentine.
Correct. Yep. So
Okay.
So that's probably about where they'll be. So this is the part that nobody gets super excited to see this transaction come across, unless you're somebody like me with the spreadsheets and all that stuff, because this trade was for the only team that this was really about basketball for was the Cavaliers. The other two, the Lakers and the Knicks, it's just accounting. That's really what it's about, and then it'll turn into basketball when they make their subsequent moves. But for now, that's where this is at.
But smart from a business perspective in terms of how this was all organized. But
yeah, there's no reason to spend money if you don't have to.
Exactly. People have been mentioning that. Why should the Lakers care about the luxury tax? All these sorts of things. Well, if you can get to the same destination you were trying to get to, which in this case with the Lakers was an open roster spot, and you can do it at a cheaper cost than another way to do it, why not go the cheaper route and get the exact same thing? So,
well, now think about it, right? Too, if later in the year, if let's say they end up with another open roster spot somehow, and Rob Pelinka goes to Jeannie Buss and says, "Hey, we really want to sign player X on a 10-day, or we want to sign veteran X to a remainder of the season contract in buyout season," she is more likely to say, "All right, yeah, let's go," because we saved all this money now.
Right.
It's just nothing changes on the cap. It's just the Buss family's money, but it does matter. I mean, we saw Steve Ballmer and the Warriors both start to balk at how big their luxury tax bills were getting, and they operate in a completely different stratosphere than the Lakers do from a finances standpoint as far as an ownership group goes. I mean, Steve Ballmer, the reality is, operates in a different stratosphere from the other 29 ownership groups in the NBA, but it just that's it. I mean, it is, as they say, smart business people don't necessarily. Yes, you do have to spend money to make money, but you also don't get rich by wasting money left and right either.
That's the side that a lot of people don't consider in this. I always think of the scene in Moneyball when they're trying to trade for Ricardo Ricon. And Jonah Hill is calling up the owner, trying to get him to sign off to give them the extra money to do this trade stuff. I'm like, people don't think about that side of a trade process, that, hey, you've actually got to go to ownership and say, we're going to spend X amount of dollars more than what we're spending right now. This is why we're spending it. This is what we're getting. That's a big piece to trades that most people don't think about or acknowledge, because that's not a public facing thing.
Yeah, I love the idea of Rob Pelinka going to Jeannie Buss and saying, "Now, when I sell, Austin Reeves,
I'm keeping the profit
next year, I get to keep the difference." Yeah, I love that movie. My favorite line in that movie is when he says, "There's 29 other teams and there's 50 feet of crap,
and then there's us."
Like that one always kind of gets me too. So great movie, man.
Absolutely, it's a good one. It's one of those ones where whenever it's on, I always have to stop and watch it.
You, me, and like 4 other people are like, more movies about front offices, less about these teams and players. Please just give us front office movies.
Keith, I've actually seen some requests though from people in our mentions or in our comment section asking us to do more on MCU movies.
Oh man, I know, I've seen that too. We'll do that. We will do that. We'll set it up in advance. Everybody who doesn't care can skip the show, but we'll do it in the off season. When we have a big lull, we'll sit down and do that. When we're not, by then too, we'll have seen more of what's coming here in phase 4 and all that. That's a promise we will make.
Yes, absolutely. We can for sure do that. Speaking of drama, Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood.
Man, this is not good.
No, this is not good. And from a PR standpoint, thank goodness for Antonio Brown taking some of the of the interest away from this story. But you don't see this kind of thing happen in the NBA very often with what's gone on here. So Kevin Porter Jr. Words said in the locker room at halftime of the Rockets game, and he leaves. He gets upset and he leaves. Christian Wood refuses to check back into the game, reportedly, for the Houston Rockets. Now both are being disciplined by the team. This is a mess. This is a mess now for a rebuilding Houston Rockets team that didn't want to deal with them. And I guess let's start with Kevin Porter Jr. He left the Cavs. The Cavs parted ways with him because of stuff like this. And now here it's becoming a problem
because of stuff like this as well.
Absolutely. And now here it is becoming a problem in Houston too. Where does this go?
Yeah, so if we go back to that, just to give a little bit more history on this. So Kevin Porter Jr. ended up being drafted with the 30th pick in the first round after many thought he might be a late lottery pick. But there are a lot of questions about his attitude, issues that he had with teammates and with coaches in his past and those kind of things. He slipped. He was the last player, or I guess most recent player, I should say, to not sign the full rookie scale amount too. He signed for less than the full rookie scale amount, and part of that was because the Pistons drafted him, but it was a prearranged trade to the Cavs, and the Cavs said, we're going to take you, but you're not going to take the full amount, and we're really going to work on trying to get you back to good. As a strictly a basketball player, Kevin Porter Jr. is wildly talented.
Yes, he is.
Multiple teams have said this is a guy who can play the James Harden role of give him the ball and let him do his thing out there. Let him really run that. And that's what the Rockets did. Cavs tired of it very quickly. They then traded him to Houston. And that was a deal that came together very late after it looked like the Cavs were just going to waive him, which is again, kind of unheard of with a first round pick.
Yeah.
He went to Houston, and John Lucas, who's a Rockets assistant coach, been around for a number of years, so receives rave reviews for working with troubled players and getting them to a better place. Did with Kevin Porter Jr. And then what happened with that one was Lucas actually came in and was kind of letting him have it a little bit about his effort level and his attention to detail and those kind of things. Reports are Porter threw something, who knows, maybe a bowl of soup, or if he's from the J.R. Smith playbook.
That's right.
But he threw something. That argument continued, and then as you said, he got in his car and he left the arena and went home. Christian Wood was late to, I believe it was shoot around, and also missed pregame mandatory testing. Then they said, all right, you're not going to start because you were late. He came off the bench, played 8 very uninspired minutes. And this one's tough for me because this is one of my favorite players.
Me too.
In the league. I really like Christian Wood quite a bit. Did not play well in that time. And then in the second half, I think the Rockets were, all right, well, Kevin Porter Jr. took off. Let's try to reset here. Let's go. And Christian Wood, by all reports, said, no, I'm good. I don't want to play. I don't want to go back in. So now both of them are not going to play in at least the next game. 1-game suspensions for both of them. And as several people called out, including Bobby Marks, John Hollinger, who both worked in NBA front offices and know this stuff quite well. Wood, you can look at and say, hey, it's a bad day. You take your lumps with the 1-game suspension and the hit and pay, and then off we go. Porter, this is starting to get to, we're running down the last chance saloon, because there have been other stories that haven't, I don't think, been fully reported on, just because I think people are trying to not to trash this kid and give him a chance. But there's other stuff out there of just, things that aren't necessarily going the way anybody wants it to go. So he's getting down to it. There's talented players get a longer leash, but you can end up in pretty big trouble if you're not careful here. And if you're Kevin Porter Jr., this might be one where you better get it right, or you might be out of the NBA entirely.
Yeah, this is, it's troubling, certainly for Kevin Porter Jr. This could lead to him being out of the NBA, like you said. For Christian Wood, hopefully this is just one bad day and everything just moves on from here. But he's also a hot name on the trade market. So what does this make an impact? Does this change his trade value at all? Does this change the Rockets' desire to trade him, or is this just a non-factor?
Yeah, I think it's more of a non-factor. than anything. I mean, maybe you might have a couple teams kind of poking around and saying, "Hey, is he really unhappy there? Does he want out? Is that more likely to trade?" But until we actually start hearing reports of that, I would say it was had a bad day. He's gonna pay for it with a loss of a game check, and then we move on. He's still young enough to be a big part of what they're trying to build back towards. He's on a very good contract. That's a big part beyond being a very good basketball player. That's a big part of why everybody's sniffing around, because he's very easy to trade for, because he has a very good contract. So that becomes a whole other thing too. So let's I would say it's maybe you raise your eyebrows a little bit and keep it a little bit more interested there, but I think in general probably doesn't mean all that much.
Yeah, and hopefully again, this is just a blip on the radar, and then everything else is fine. I shouldn't say blip when we've just been talking about MCU, but there you have it. Let's finish off with some of the minor moves I saw at Snap. Let's finish off with some minor moves here, or relatively minor moves. The Grizzlies did a few things. They waived Sam Merrill, and they're doing this in order to bring in some other players. My page is not loading now. Keith, help me out. What happened?
I got it. All right, so the Grizzlies waived Sam Merrill. Merrill is likely to miss the remainder of the season. He's going to have ankle surgery, so no real on-court production loss there from the Grizzlies. Did have a fully guaranteed $1.5 million contract, so that goes on the Grizzlies' books as dead money. Then they converted, or it wasn't really a conversion. They signed Killian Tilly, who was on a two-way contract with the Grizzlies. It was his second year on a two-way with Memphis. They signed him to a full standard contract, about $4 million over the next 2 years. They dipped into what they had remaining of the room exception to give him more than the minimum amount to kind of plus those years up for Tilly. So he will move up to the standard roster. He's been playing more as they've had some injuries in their front court. Guy who he went through some injury issues at Gonzaga at one point in time, looked like he would be a first round pick, and then ended up being a guy who was undrafted, caught on with Memphis 2 years on a two-way, and now this was his second year on a two-way, now onto a standard. And then to replace him, Tyrell Terry, who had been with the team on a hardship deal. You may remember him. He was drafted by the Dallas Mavericks fairly high and given a 2-year guarantee, 2 guaranteed years in a 4-year contract, and then Dallas waived him at the end of the preseason. He is now going to be on a two-way, replacing Tilly. So little series of moves there. You're going to start seeing more of the two-way moves happening here in the next couple weeks as we're getting down to the deadline for two-way contract maneuvering and the like. But we'll see what that looks like, because they've tweaked and changed a lot of the two-way rules, so we may not see quite as much of that as we usually do.
Speaking of the Mavs, was just announced recently, Kristaps Porzingis now in health and safety protocols, so that's a big blow for them. For noted Mavs fan Keith Smith there, wearing his Mavs t-shirt on.
Let's stick with that real quick though.
Yeah.
There's a lot of buzz that the Mavs, like some of these, we talked about Stanley Johnson. The Lakers have found a need for him, really like the way he's played. It is fit. I saw LeBron's comments on Stanley Johnson of he was able to fit in because of his time with South Bay. So he was able to slide right in with terminology and all those things. We're going to start seeing more of these teams trying to keep these guys that they kind of, I hate to say discovered through this hardship process, because it's not like they didn't know, but guys who have shown something on these hardships. Well, the Mavs are in that boat with Marquise Chris, where Marquise Chris has played pretty well. Porzingis in the health and safety protocols. They've also had some injuries up front with them. So they're supposedly really looking for a way to keep Marquise Chris. And I saw Tim McMahon, who's very tied in with Dallas, news-wise. He had said it's something to keep an eye on, because the team doesn't have a roster spot to do it. And that is the challenge right now. One of the things that he said is maybe Willie Cauley-Stein could be waived, as Willie Cauley-Stein has been away from Dallas. I have looked and have been able to find out he's been away from the team for several we might be headed on months now due to personal reasons, and I don't know what the what's going on. I
Mhm.
hope everything is okay
Yes.
with him and his family and the like there. But yeah, he's been away from the team for a while, and I've not been able to find out what the reason for that absence is. But he posited that could be where they go to open up a roster spot. So again, just something to keep an eye on. We're gonna see a handful more of these situations come up over the next couple weeks as these 10 days are really starting to run their course, because the vast majority of teams are getting most of their players back out of the health and safety protocols. We've got a handful that just get hit later, so they're going to continue probably until the middle of the month. But most teams are starting to get back on the healthy side.
Speaking of health and safety protocols, a few other veteran names that you'll recognize. You've got Bismack Biyombo to the Suns.
Yeah.
Lance Stevenson, welcome back to the Pacers.
Yeah. Third run around with the Pacers.
Yeah.
I forgot about the second one. I clearly remember the first one. I did not remember the second one, but yeah.
Yeah, he did have a second stint there, so third season there. You also had the Grizzlies. They signed Daquan Jeffries to a contract there. They also we talked about that. But then the Warriors, they released Jeff Doughton and signed Quindary Weatherspoon.
Yep.
So that happened.
Hardship guy who had shown to play well. I think they kind of see him as maybe being a little bit like Gary Payton was for them. Guard, a little bit of a guard, a little bit bigger, rugged kind of guy that they might be able to plug in there. And the Warriors use their two-way guys quite a bit.
Yeah. Yep. But bottom line, you're still seeing some teams make some moves, but like Keith noted, it is starting to slow down a bit as teams are getting players back, which is good. That's exactly what we wanted. Remember, NBA going to revisit their current policies as of January 19th. They're going to take a look at where things are at that point and then decide from there. Do they continue on with these hardship contracts, the rules that they've got in place to make teams sign players to hardship contracts? Does that continue to exist after January 19th? We'll see how things are looking in just a few weeks.
And I want to make sure I credit, yes, it was Mark Stein. He reported G League teams were notified over the weekend that play remains scheduled to resume on Wednesday. So just another sign that they things are really improving and they're starting to get these players back and everybody's getting back into where they want to be, set up wise, because that the G League is starting back up. The G League shut down in part. They don't have the testing capabilities nor the private travel capabilities of the NBA. And in addition, they were just,
so many of their players are getting pulled.
Within the NBA.
Right.
So they were really in just a messy part. So they're going to get back to it too. One more name on a hardship that people will recognize. Luke Cornett.
Yes.
Finished a hardship run with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now he's joining the Milwaukee Bucks on a hardship. So Luke Cornett hanging around. He's a guy a lot of people have said they expect to be one of these guys who finishes the year on an NBA roster.
Well, we'll have to keep an eye on him then and see if he's able to thrive in Milwaukee. But I think that about wraps it up for today in terms of major news stories and things of that nature. We'll be back tomorrow, touching base on everything else that goes on in the world of the NBA. Obviously, a lot to keep an eye on here with Kyrie Irving coming back. We'll see what happens with the Rockets, and of course, getting a little bit closer now to the trade deadline, so expect trade talks to start to ramp up as well.
Hey, I want to revisit one thing before we wrap, before you give the sign off. I made a prediction on the last show.
You did. That's right.
We both have a happy new year, and we did.
You were correct.
Both the Celtics and the Lakers. The little momentum to close out 2021 and start 2022. So
speaking of which, we may need to tomorrow talk a little bit about Damian Lillard. Yeah, we need to talk about him a little bit, because there's some observations and I've seen some chatter in Portland and things like that. So we'll have that discussion tomorrow. Little preview for tomorrow's show.
Love it.
All right, everybody. Thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Ring that notification bell as well. Till next time, stay safe and see you.